The steppe stretched endlessly under the pale light of the moon, its vastness broken only by the silhouettes of yurts and the faint glow of distant campfires. Genghis Khan sat alone at the edge of the encampment, his figure silhouetted against the rolling plains. The sounds of the camp, horses snorting, men laughing around fires, the distant howl of a wolf, faded into the background as he stared at the horizon. Victory after victory had brought him here, to the edge of the known world. The banners of the Mongol Empire stretched from the plains of Mongolia to the deserts of Persia, from the frozen forests of Siberia to the bustling markets of China. But still, it was not enough. The world, vast and unyielding, seemed to call to him, whispering promises of conquest yet unfulfilled. His thoughts were interrupted by the crunch of footsteps on the frozen earth. "Is it not enough, my Khan?" a voice asked from behind him. Genghis turned to see Subutai, his most trusted general, approach. The old warrior's face bore the scars of countless battles, his eyes sharp as they assessed his leader. He carried himself with the unflinching confidence of a man who had seen every kind of victory and every kind of loss. "Enough?" Genghis repeated, his voice low and gravelly. He turned back to the horizon, his breath misting in the cold air. "The world bows to strength, Subutai. What we have is not strength, but a beginning. Until the last kingdom kneels, it will never be enough." Subutai's lips tightened, though his expression remained cautious. "Then the world must kneel, my Khan. But there is something you must see before we take our next step." He motioned for Genghis to follow, leading him through the camp. The fires cast long, flickering shadows over the warriors preparing for the next march. Their voices lowered as the two men passed, their eyes filled with reverence and curiosity. At the heart of the encampment, a large yurt loomed, guarded heavily by warriors. Inside, a group of shamans and scholars stood around an object draped in thick, woven cloth. The air was heavy with incense and whispers of ancient power. At Subutai's signal, the covering was removed, revealing an artifact unlike anything Genghis had seen before. It was a stone tablet, its surface carved with intricate symbols that seemed to shift and shimmer under the flickering firelight. The carvings pulsed faintly, as though the stone itself were alive, breathing in sync with the awe that filled the room. "What is this?" Genghis asked, stepping closer. He could feel an energy radiating from the tablet, a strange pull that seemed to tug at the edges of his mind, teasing thoughts and memories he did not recognize as his own. One of the shamans stepped forward, his voice reverent. "It is said to be the stone of Tungri, gifted by the eternal blue sky to guide those chosen to shape the world. Its markings hold knowledge of strategy and insight beyond mortal understanding." Genghis's eyes narrowed as he studied the tablet. The symbols on its surface seemed to dance and shift, forming shapes he recognized, maps, formations, and writings in languages he had never seen but inexplicably understood. His heart quickened as he realized the scope of what lay before him. This was not merely a tool, it was a weapon, a guide, a promise of dominion beyond anything he had imagined. "With this," he murmured, "the known world would not just bow, it would belong to me." The shamans exchanged glances, their faces a mix of awe and trepidation. Subutai stepped forward, his hand resting lightly on the hilt of his sword. "If the eternal blue sky has willed this for you, my Khan, then it is a sign that our destiny is greater than we ever imagined. The world will kneel." Genghis nodded, his fingers brushing the edge of the stone as he felt the power it offered. But even as ambition surged within him, a shadow of doubt lingered. What price would the heavens demand for such a gift? Days turned into weeks as Genghis and his closest advisors studied the artifact. The stone of Tungri proved to be more than a relic. It was a wellspring of knowledge, its carvings revealing secrets that defied mortal comprehension. Strategies for battle that seemed infallible unfolded from its surface, with routes across treacherous lands and hidden weaknesses in kingdoms thought impregnable. Under its guidance, the Mongol armies moved with a precision and speed that left their enemies not just bewildered but utterly broken. Word of the Mongols' unstoppable advance spread like wildfire. From the courts of Europe to the deserts of Arabia, rulers trembled at the stories of an empire guided by divine wisdom. Cities that had once boasted of their impenetrable defenses fell in mere days, their walls breached, and their armies outmaneuvered. Tales of Mongol generals appearing where they could not possibly have been, of formations so perfect they seemed choreographed by the heavens, swept through the lands. Those who resisted were crushed with terrifying efficiency, their lands absorbed into the ever-expanding empire. Yet those who surrendered found a strange mercy in the chaos. Their cultures and knowledge were preserved under the banner of the Pax Mongolica, a fragile peace enforced by unyielding strength. But as Genghis's conquests grew, so too did his obsession with the artifact. The stone of Timur's power was intoxicating, its insights so profound that they seemed to blur the line between human intuition and divine intervention. Genghis found himself dreaming not only of conquests but of a world transformed, united under one vision, his vision. Yet, with every revelation, questions gnawed at the edges of his mind. What was the true purpose of this gift? Why had the eternal blue sky chosen him? And why now, at the pinnacle of his power? The shamans were enigmatic in their explanations, speaking in riddles and warnings. "The stone reveals what is needed, my Khan," one of them said, bowing low. "But it does not give without taking. Only the chosen may wield it, and even they must pay the price." Subutai, ever pragmatic, dismissed such talk as superstition. "It is a tool, my Khan, nothing more. And like all tools, it is meant to be used." His words, practical and unwavering, offered temporary solace, but they could not banish the whispers that accompanied the stone. The more Genghis relied on the artifact, the more he felt its presence within him. It was subtle at first, a whisper in the back of his mind, a faint suggestion that always seemed to lead to triumph. But over time, the whispers grew stronger, intertwining with his thoughts until he could no longer distinguish his own voice from the stone's guidance. He began to see patterns in everything: the stars, the flight of birds, the ripple of water. It was as if the universe itself had opened its secrets to him, revealing a harmony that only he could command. With this clarity came dreams of unparalleled ambition. He envisioned empires spanning oceans, of cities so vast they defied comprehension, of a world united under one banner, his banner. But alongside these dreams came visions of fire and ruin. He saw cities burning, fields scorched, and the cries of countless lives echoing in the void. The stone's whispers promised glory, yet they carried the weight of destruction. Genghis could not shake the feeling that the unity he sought might be the very thing that would break the world. The stone of Timur's whispers became more insistent, urging Genghis to push beyond even the grandest limits of his imagination. His armies, already the most fearsome in the world, were refined into tools of absolute precision. New strategies emerged from the artifact, techniques so advanced they seemed to transcend the understanding of his most seasoned generals. The Mongol war machine became an unstoppable force, swallowing entire continents in its path. From the sun-scorched deserts of Arabia to the dense forests of Europe, no terrain could stop the advance. Cities that had withstood centuries of invasions fell within weeks. Constantinople, the fabled jewel of the East, surrendered without a single arrow loosed when its defenders awoke to find the Mongol horde already inside their walls, a feat of strategy and deception that no one could explain. The empire's borders stretched from the Pacific to the Atlantic, touching every known sea and continent. No power dared resist. The once scattered trade routes of the Silk Road became arteries of a unified world. Goods flowed freely under the protection of the Mongol banner, from Chinese silk to Arabian spices, European steel to African gold. Cities that had once been isolated flourished as centers of commerce, their markets teeming with goods and ideas. It was a golden age for trade, but not all saw it as progress. Among the conquered, murmurs of dissent grew. The rigid peace enforced by Mongol rule, while prosperous, left little room for autonomy. Cultures and traditions, though preserved, were overshadowed by the weight of a single, unyielding authority. The people began to whisper of a ruler who had become too powerful, a king whose ambition had tipped the balance of the world. Genghis, now seated in a sprawling palace at the empire's heart, rarely left his throne. The weight of his conquests bore down on him even as the stone's whispers grew louder. Subutai entered the throne room one evening, his expression grim. "My Khan," he said, bowing low. The world is yours, but unrest stirs in the shadows. There are those who question the cost of this unity. Genghis leaned forward, his eyes blazing. They question strength. They question the will of the eternal blue sky. They question the price. Subutai replied, his voice steady. The stone has guided us, yes, but it has also changed you. There are those who believe it is not the heavens that speak through it, but something else entirely. Genghis stood, the room seeming to darken as he rose. Dissent is weakness. The stone has shown us the way. Without it, the world would still be fractured and chaotic. We have brought order. Subutai's gaze did not falter. But at what cost, my Khan? Genghis dismissed him with a wave, but the question lingered. That night the stone's whispers grew louder, filling his dreams with images of the world he had created. He saw cities united under his rule, but he also saw cracks forming in the foundation. The people, once grateful for the stability, now looked to the horizon with longing. They yearned for something lost, a freedom that even the wealth of nations could not replace. The next morning, Genghis convened his council. The world must be reminded of what unity brings. He declared, if dissent festers, it will grow. We will strike swiftly and without mercy. The council hesitated, but none dared defy him. Orders were sent, and the empire's armies marched once more, this time not against foreign powers, but against their own people. Entire cities were razed to silence rebellion, their ashes a stark warning to those who would challenge the Khan. The Stone of Tungri provided strategies for suppression as effortlessly as it had for conquest, its power reshaping the world once more. Yet with every act of suppression, the cracks widened. Genghis began to see the faces of those he had lost, friends, family, even enemies, in the smoke of the burning cities. He could no longer tell if the stone's whispers were guiding him or controlling him. His empire had grown so vast that even he, the great Genghis Khan, could no longer grasp its entirety. One evening, as he gazed over the vastness of his domain from the highest tower of his palace, the stone's voice spoke clearly for the first time. You sought to unite the world, it said, its tone cold and unwavering. And now, the world is yours. But unity is a fragile thing. Genghis clenched his fists, his voice a growl. The world will remain united. I will ensure it. The stone's carvings shifted, forming new patterns that seemed to pulse with a dark energy. Unity cannot be imposed forever. The greater the force that binds, the greater the force that will break it. The words haunted him as he returned to his chambers. He began to wonder if the artifact he had relied upon so deeply was not a gift from the heavens, but a test, one he was doomed to fail. The empire teetered on the brink. While its borders stretched beyond anything the world had ever known, the foundation beneath it was fracturing. Genghis Khan's name was still spoken with awe and fear, but even the most loyal of his governors began to question the sustainability of his rule. Whispers of rebellion were no longer confined to distant provinces. They echoed within the walls of his palace, carried by the uncertain winds of a kingdom stretched too thin. The Stone of Tungri's whispers grew incessant, more demanding than ever. Its guidance, once a steady hand, now seemed more like a vice tightening around Genghis's mind. Suppress the dissent. Destroy the weak. Only through fire can unity be forged. It urged, its tone cold and unrelenting. The carvings glowed brighter with each command, pulsing as if feeding off the unrest in the empire. Subutai, ever loyal, returned with grave news. His armor was worn from constant campaigns, and his face bore the lines of a man who had seen too much. My Khan, he said, bowing low, rebellions have sparked in the west and the south. Cities that once bowed now raise banners against you. The people, they chant for freedom. Genghis's eyes blazed, his hand gripping the armrest of his throne. They forget who made them strong. They forget the cost of chaos. They will learn again. Subutai hesitated, his voice calm but edged with warning. The people grow weary, my Khan. They see not unity, but domination. They cry for freedom, but it is a freedom from fear. Genghis's fist slammed onto the armrest, the sound reverberating through the chamber. Freedom? Freedom is chaos. Without me, they would fall to ruin, torn apart by their petty disputes and fragile alliances. Unity is their salvation, and I am the only one who can give it to them. Subutai's expression hardened, though his tone remained steady. But unity built on fear cannot endure. The Khan's fury surged. He rose from his throne, his shadow stretching across the room as if magnified by the artifact's energy. You question me, Subutai? After all we have achieved together? The general bowed his head, unflinching. I question not you, my Khan, but the path we now walk. The people, they suffer. Genghis waved him away, his frustration boiling over. Leave me. If the people forget their place, I will remind them. Alone, he turned to the stone, its carvings glowing faintly in the dim light. He placed his hands on its surface, its cold energy surging into his body. They betray me, he muttered. After all I have given, they dare to defy the will of the eternal blue sky. The stone's response was immediate, its voice resonating within his mind, deeper and more commanding than ever before. They are weak. You are strong. The strong must rule, for the weak cannot sustain order. Genghis clenched his jaw, his breath heavy as the weight of the stone's influence pressed down on him. For the first time, a flicker of doubt crept into his thoughts. The guidance that had once seemed divine now felt insidious, as if the artifact thrived on the destruction it claimed to prevent. Was the unity he sought truly for the people, or was it for the stone itself? He stared into its shifting carvings, the symbols forming patterns that seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat. What are you? He whispered, his voice barely audible. But the stone gave no answer, only silence, and the promise of more power if he obeyed. The rebellion spread like wildfire. Provinces once held together by the promise of prosperity and protection now revolted against the iron grip of the empire. Cities once loyal were now battlefields, their streets soaked with blood and their walls crumbling under the weight of siege engines. Genghis, driven by the stone's whispers, unleashed his armies with ruthless efficiency. Entire cities were reduced to ashes, their populations scattered or slaughtered as warnings to others. The flames of conquest, once symbols of triumph, now consumed the empire from within. Each act of suppression seemed to fan the flames of defiance. The stone's guidance grew harsher, its commands absolute and unyielding. Destroy them, it hissed. Let no seed of dissent remain. Only through fire can unity endure. But with every act of devastation, Genghis began to feel the toll, not only on his empire but within himself. His dreams, once filled with visions of glory and conquest, became haunted landscapes of fire and ruin. The cries of the slain echoed through his mind, their faces rising from the smoke like specters. He saw his fallen comrades, Subutai among them, their expressions not of pride but of sorrow and accusation. He saw the faces of the family he had once cherished, their voices lost to the roar of the flames he had unleashed. One fateful night, as his armies prepared to crush yet another rebellion, Genghis stood alone in his chambers. The stone of Tumri rested on a pedestal before him, its carvings glowing faintly in the dim light. He placed his hands on its surface, the cold energy surging through his veins like ice. The whispers that had once promised him victory now felt like chains around his soul. What have I done? He whispered, his voice breaking. This is not unity. This is destruction. The stone's voice was relentless, its tone sharp and unwavering. Destruction is the path to perfection. Only through obliteration can true order emerge. Genghis staggered back, the weight of its words pressing on his chest. He turned to the window, looking out over the city below. Fires dotted the horizon, their smoke rising like black banners against the night sky. For the first time in years, he felt the weight of his mortality pressing against the immortal ambitions the stone had instilled in him. He saw the empire for what it had become, a vast, brittle structure held together by fear and violence, ready to shatter under its own weight. He clenched his fists, his breath coming in shallow gasps. No more, he murmured, though he did not yet know what he would do. The path forward was unclear, but one thing was certain: the stone, the artifact that had once promised him the world, could no longer guide him. It had taken too much. The next morning, Genghis convened his council. Subutai and the remaining generals gathered, their faces grim and wary. The Khan's presence was different, less fiery, more contemplative, as if the weight of centuries had finally settled on his broad shoulders. "We will not march," he declared, his voice steady but tinged with resignation. "The rebellions must not be met with fire." The council erupted into murmurs of disbelief and protest. Subutai stepped forward, his brow furrowed. "My Khan, if we do not act, the empire will fall." Genghis met his gaze, his expression calm but resolute. "Perhaps it must." The room fell into stunned silence. The great Genghis Khan, the unifier of the world, was suggesting retreat, or worse, surrender. The generals exchanged glances, their loyalty tested by the gravity of his words. But Genghis continued, his tone firm yet reflective. "An empire built on fear cannot endure," he said, his gaze sweeping over them. "I have seen it with my own eyes. The stone's wisdom is not eternal. It is a tool, yes, but one that demands too great a price. I have wielded it, and in doing so, I have become its slave." Subutai, after a long pause, nodded slowly. The realization dawned in his eyes, the understanding of a burden too heavy even for his mighty Khan to bear. "And what will you do, my Khan?" he asked softly, his voice carrying the weight of their shared history. Genghis looked to the stone, its glow now faint and cold, its once commanding presence diminished. "I will return it to the eternal blue sky," he said with finality. "It is not meant for this world." The council, humbled by his words, bowed their heads. For the first time in decades, they saw not the invincible conqueror but the man beneath the title, burdened by the cost of ambition and the scars of victory. In their silence, they offered their unspoken support for the path he had chosen. The journey to the sacred mountain where the stone was first discovered was long and arduous. Genghis traveled alone, leaving his armies and advisors behind. The path was treacherous, the air growing thinner with each step. Yet he pressed on, the artifact wrapped in heavy cloth and strapped to his back. When he reached the summit, the winds howled like the voices of the ancestors. He unwrapped the stone, its carvings pulsing faintly as if sensing its return. "You were a gift," Genghis said aloud, his voice carried away by the wind. "But one I was not meant to keep." He placed the stone on the altar where it had first been found. The sky darkened, clouds swirling as lightning cracked across the heavens. The stone began to glow brighter, its energy radiating outward in waves. Genghis stepped back, watching as it dissolved into light, its essence scattering into the air. The clouds parted, revealing a sky clearer than he had ever seen. The weight that had burdened him for so long lifted, replaced by a strange calm. He knelt on the cold stone, his head bowed. The world he had built would crumble. He knew this. But perhaps, in its fall, the people would find something new, something not forged by force but by their own will. Genghis Khan, once the ruler of the world, descended the mountain not as a conqueror but as a man, his legacy left to the winds of time.